Angel Ormston. In the summer of 1992, Angel Ormston was a 17-year-old high school student living in the quiet, middle-class suburb of Mentor in Lake County, Ohio. Known for her radiant smile and golden blonde hair, Angel was friendly, approachable, and loved spending time with her friends. Her social nature often led her to hang out with friends and drive around town, enjoying music and the freedom that came with it. Like many teenagers her age, Angel was navigating the journey of growing up in a small town, but her life was tragically cut short, leaving her family and friends to cope with the deep loss. Angel had the freedom to go wherever she pleased, thanks to her own car. The Great Lakes Mall, a popular spot in the community, was one of her favorite places to hang out, and she also worked part-time at a burger restaurant there. On the afternoon of July 31, 1992, Angel told her mother that she was heading to the mall to pick up her paycheck and run a few errands. However, by the next morning, Angel hadn't returned home. Since it wasn't unusual for her to spend the night at a friend's house, her mother initially thought she was there, and no one was immediately concerned. But as the hours passed, her family began to worry when Angel never showed up, setting off a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Angel didn't really have rules when it came to checking in with her mother, Jackie, because she wasn't a particularly strict person. Since Angel's mother was aware of her high level of independence, she didn't worry as much as some other parents would have. Angel never had a lot of rules guiding her life because her father, a long-haul truck driver, was also frequently gone from the house. 2 days later, when Angel's older brother went to the mall to do a little shopping, he spotted something that concerned him. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. In the parking lot of the Great Lakes Mall was the 1981 white-color Honda Civic owned by Angel. He approached Angel's vehicle and peered inside to find her pocketbook and hairbrush lying on the seat. He immediately called their mother, who responded to his call and came to pick up Angel's car. Jackie, their mother, was however still of the opinion that Angel was with Stacy, her best friend. Stacy's residence was the first one she tried to call, but no one picked up. At this point, Angel's mother started to worry and ultimately made the decision to call the police to report her daughter missing. It was now August 2, 1992. Angel had last been seen on July 31st. When questioned by the police about why she had delayed so long before reporting her daughter missing, Jackie explained that she believed she had to wait 48 hours before making a report. Jackie once more resorted to Stacy, who was Angel's closest friend and the person most likely to know where Angel was. Stacy and Angel spoke on the phone when they were separated despite spending practically every day together. But on this particular weekend, Stacy had been baking cookies at her sister's place, so she was shocked when Jackie eventually called her. She hasn't seen Angel all weekend and has no idea where she could be. Jackie, who had assumed that her daughter had been with Stacy since she departed on Friday afternoon, was horrified to learn of this. The Mentor police undertake a thorough search right away, and Larry Fish is named the case's lead detective. He began by thoroughly searching Angel's vehicle, but no indication of foul play was discovered. Additionally, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Instead, it appeared as though Angel had stood up and walked away from her car by herself. However, no one who knew Angel well could comprehend why she would want to pack up and leave town. She was highly loved, outgoing, and popular. She also planned to attend college in the future. Investigators started to look into the idea that Angel may have been taken because there were no indications of a fight. Numerous fingerprints were found on her car when it was dusted for them, but they could all be linked to Angel's friends and relatives. Inadvertently, this made them all suspect. First, Detective Fisher contacted her father's trucking company, but dispatch records indicate that he was out of the state at the time of Angel's disappearance. He then demanded that Jackie undergo a polygraph test, but to the amazement of the detectives, Jackie declined to do so. Jackie and her strange behavior came under closer scrutiny by the detectives. They questioned her about a number of things, including why she took so long to report her daughter missing and if she thought Angel had been the victim of foul play. Why then did she move Angel's car, potentially disrupting any evidence? However, the police lacked concrete evidence against Jackie and were unable to legally compel her to take the polygraph test. The burger business where Angel worked was the last location she claimed to have been to, so the police began to investigate there. When the police arrived, the burger restaurant, Angel's co-workers claimed that she never showed up there that day and that her paycheck was still available. However, when Angel's co-workers revealed to the investigators that they already knew what might have happened to Angel, the investigators became alarmed. They told the detectives about a peculiar male manager they had who enjoyed preying on the young female employees and would frequently linger nearby while they changed into their work uniforms. This manager had been fired for sexual harassment, including instances where he had touched several of the employees in an inappropriate manner. After investigators looked into his background, they discovered that the individual has a history of having contact with minor girls. The employees continued by saying that the manager had a thing for Angel in particular, and would frequently pay her additional attention, keep an eye on her while she worked, and make lewd remarks about her. They added that he had found every opportunity in the little kitchen to converse with and approach Angel. Due to this recently discovered information, the manager was elevated to the top of the list of suspects. He was promptly located by the police, but he flatly denied any involvement in Angel's disappearance. He claimed he hadn't seen Angel since the two of them had worked together, and that day he had been far from the Great Lakes Mall. He actually had the timesheets to show that he had been employed at another fast food restaurant at the time. The suspicion that the burger restaurant was somehow connected to Angel's disappearance persisted in the minds of the investigators. They questioned the manager and staff members once more and learned a secret that Angel had been hiding from her family. When Angel told her mother she was going to pick up her paycheck, she never mentioned that it would be her last. It appeared that Angel had been fired from her job for consistently being late. Everyone associated with her place of work was eventually cleared. The police was once more back to the very beginning. Angel's friends and family couldn't figure out why anyone would want to hurt her. She was a kind and trustworthy girl who didn't tend to have enemies. Investigators had a tendency to think that her trusting character may have allowed someone to take advantage of her, and that she may have left with someone who intended to harm her. Stacy, Angel's best friend, was the last person to see the victim alive in this instance. The last person to see a victim alive is typically the one who has done something sinister. The investigators once again decided that Stacy was definitely a person of interest. Police made the decision to speak with Stacy. They had a 4-hour conversation. Stacy was eager to share all the information she knows with the detectives, but her alibi remained the same. She spent the entire weekend baking at her sister's house. She did provide one potential lead for the detectives, though. She named a student at their school whom she advised the detectives to look into. The student was Mark Satka. According to Stacy, 19-year-old Mark Satka had just received his honors diploma from their school. Mentor High and Angel had a strong admiration for Mark and yearned to be in a relationship with him. Angel's relationship with Mark over the summer was a secret only to her closest friends. The largest secret was revealed by Stacy afterwards. Angel was pregnant with Mark's child. Stacy said that Angel had wanted to tell Mark she was pregnant before she vanished. She had hoped that he would embrace her and want to start a relationship with her and raise the child. However, Mark was scheduled to enroll at Akron University and was alleged to have just been leading Angel on throughout the summer. He didn't seem to be interested in a long-term relationship with Angel. On hearing this, Mark Satka was rounded up by the police right away to be questioned. Mark was shocked to learn that he was being investigated over the case and insisted that he and Angel were not even dating, let alone that she could be pregnant with his child. He claimed that although they had only ever had one sexual encounter, it had been a long time ago. Then he said he had a girlfriend and had been dating her for 2 years. According to him, he worked until 5 o'clock that Friday and then went to the mall to buy a present for his girlfriend. Later, he then had pizza with friends. Police started investigating his alibi and began by looking into his workplace. They proceeded to Mark's place of employment, and his time card did show that he was speaking the truth about his attendance at work. When they took Mark's shopping route to the stores, they discovered that he could have made the trip in the time he claimed. The friends Mark claimed he linked up with that night were finally approached. They verified they had met for pizza and a movie at 9 o'clock, but Mark was unable to present any witnesses for the shopping outing. Nobody recognized Mark when investigators questioned staff members from the stores he claimed to have gone to. This made the investigators question Mark's account of this time period. Due to this gap in his evening, the detectives asked Mark to take a polygraph examination. He agreed and did really well on the test, proving that he wasn't giving false information in his responses. Mark was no longer considered a suspect as a result of his cooperation and the polygraph test. The police then reverted to the original assumption that Angel either fled town or was kidnapped from her car by a different offender. They suspected Angel may have fled to have her pregnancy alone since she knew her mother would not approve of an abortion. Once more, there were no leads for the police to pursue until a few weeks later when a prisoner at the Lake County Detention Center provided a tip. According to him, in Cleveland, there was a prostitute named Angel who fit Angel Ormiston's description of a blonde between the ages of 17-20 with a lovely smile, and who was found wandering the streets alone. The description was a perfect fit for Angel. The prisoner claimed to have seen Angel moments before his arrest. He continued by saying that a man by the name of Pimp Gaddy had employed Angel. When Detective Fisher contacted his Cleveland colleagues, they confirmed that the police in Cleveland were aware of someone going by the name of Pimp Daddy. He operated his business out of a 2-story building on the outskirts of the city. Runaways, strays, and troublesome youths made up his workforce, but they had been told not to speak to authorities or divulge their names. Police could only attempt to save Angel once. They made the decision to raid the location, specifically during their busiest hours, which was a Friday evening. Police were able to locate the said girl after a search warrant was approved. While she acknowledged that her name was Angel, she remained silent. The only way to determine if this was the missing Mentor, Ohio resident, Angel Ormiston, was to call her mother Jackie and urge her to travel to Cleveland to meet the young woman and maybe identify her as her daughter. Jackie prepared herself for the worst, but it was discovered that the girl was not Angel Ormiston when she got there. Nevertheless, this act did result in some good when the little girl's family was found and she was sent home, rescuing her from a life of crime, drugs, and prostitution. In an effort to get Angel's name and story in the media, Jackie, who was inconsolable, invited every local news station into her home. She pleaded for information and begged for assistance in finding her daughter innumerable times. Flyers that Angel's friends created were dispersed across the neighborhood. In order to gather a sum of $10,000 for Angel's safe return, the community turns to local businesses, organizations, and charity for donations. Within a month, the Mentor Police Department received thousands of tips. Police spent a lot of time investigating the tips but to no avail. Because Jackie believed the police weren't acting quickly enough, the Ormistons had to hire their own private investigator, but this did not provide any results either. After more than 3 months, Angel was still missing. Despite the lack of progress in her situation, her mother remained optimistic. In case Angel ever called home, Jackie left a voice note for her on her answering machine. As the months passed, there was frustration among Angel's family and friends, and rage at the police station intensified. The search for Angel Ormiston ended when a local man went hunting with his dog on December 15, 1992. The dog detected a scent during their walk and moved in the direction of a drainage ditch. The man then became aware of a sizable form that was covered in a sheet and had a rope tied around it. He noticed something that appeared to be a human hand when he pulled back the fabric. Despite being severely decomposed, the body had been lying face down for several months when it was discovered by investigators, which is roughly how long Angel has been missing. Green duct tape and an old piece of clothesline were used to bind the corpse. Police were able to identify the body as being that of a female despite the fact that it was completely unrecognizable. Everyone recognized the person in their hearts. In an effort to identify her killer, the forensic team collected her bones and started digging through the earth for any evidence that could help with the case. The coroner was able to identify Angel Ormson's remains on December 16th, thanks to dental records. The small town's residents were shocked when the news of Angel's murder traveled throughout the community. An autopsy revealed that Angel had suffered a traumatic head injury as well as 2 stab wounds to the chest. Those stab wounds were determined to be the cause of death by the coroner. She had been violently and angrily stabbed. At least the police had physical evidence by this point to try to identify the murderer. The forensic team was able to retrieve a blue piece of carpet fibers which was stuck to the duct tape. In their search for the matching blue carpet, police put together a list of all the houses associated with Angel, including her family and friends. One of those residences belonged to Mark Satka's parents. The boy Angel had been seeing all summer. The house was empty at the time of Angel's murder since it was up for sale, but Mark had been spotted using it. There were only 2 persons with the keys at that time, Mark and his mother. When the police went over to the house to look at it, they discovered it had been sold, but they were permitted by the new owners to search the house. The owners have entirely renovated the house, with the exception of 2 rooms and the basement. Investigators observed blue carpet squares on the steps as they descended into the basement. They then took some samples to compare with the blue carpet fibers discovered on Angel's remains. They also observed that a part of the laundry room clothing line had been removed. This was also hurriedly processed in the lab, and the findings support their suspicions. There was a match. The carpets, stairs, and walls of the basement all had small blood stains, and a bloody thumbprint was also obtained for testing. The police soon arrested Mark Satka for Angel's murder the day after they found his basement of horrors. His arrest came 5 months after Angel Ormston vanished. Mark was still acting defiantly and was attempting to persuade the police that they lacked sufficient proof to prosecute him. Investigators were, however, looking at his car at the same time. Even though Mark had made an effort to thoroughly wash his car, the job fell short. The exact roll of green duct tape that was used to bind Angel was still in his car, along with remnants of blood in the trunk. After being challenged by Detective Fisher with all of these tangible evidence against him, Mark finally acknowledged doing something stupid. When asked what stupid thing he did, he said that he killed Angel. He claimed that he brought Angel to the house with the purpose of having intercourse with her, but that he became angry when she revealed that she was pregnant and that he was the father. When Angel refused to get the abortion he insisted she have, he got angry and knocked her to the ground by his repeated punches. He hurried up the stairs and raced to the garage to retrieve a knife and stabbed her twice. Detectives questioned if Angel was alive or dead before he stabbed her. He responded that she was alive since he could see her breathing. Mark then dragged her up the stairs after wrapping her body and tying a laundry line around her legs. She was placed in his car and he drove to the woods to discard her body there. He went back home to clean up before going to dinner with his friends. The entire time that Mark had been eating pepperoni pizza and having fun with his friends, Angel's body had been lying in a shallow grave. After Mark's interview and confessions, he was accused of killing Angel. The news brought some relief to Angel's loved ones as authorities finally made progress in the case. Mark led investigators to the roadside spot where he had discarded Angel's car keys and then guided them to a remote location where he had thrown away the knife used in the crime, though the weapon was never recovered. Mark's motive for killing Angel was rooted in his belief that she was a hindrance to his life. He saw her as a complication, especially since she was pregnant with his child. Despite not having any genuine feelings for Angel, Mark felt he would be burdened with responsibility for her and their unborn child, which he clearly resented. In February 1993, Mark pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and kidnapping in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. During the investigation, he had passed a polygraph test, which was a reflection of his lack of conscience. Throughout the process, Mark showed no remorse for his actions, further illustrating his indifference to the crime he had committed. Moving on to the next case. Barbara Follett. The 1930s was a monumental decade in world history. In 1930, the first ever FIFA World Cup took place, Pluto was discovered and named, and future astronaut Buzz Aldrin was born. In the years that followed, the Hindenburg disaster shocked the world, famed aviator Amelia Earhart vanished, and ultimately, World War II began. Over time, many of the most intriguing mysteries of the 1930s have faded into obscurity. One such mystery is Barbara Follett. Born on March 4, 1914, in Hanover, New Hampshire, Barbara Newhall Follett appeared destined for greatness. Her father, Wilson, was a literary editor, critic, and university lecturer, while her mother, Helen, was a children's author. It was no surprise to her parents when Barbara's creativity and talent for writing emerged during her homeschooling sessions. The little girl excelled in writing and reading activities. And by the age of 4, she'd begun to write her own poetry. Barbara's writing often dealt with the themes of nature and the wilderness. Her first novel, The House Without Windows, revolved around a young girl who ran away from home to live in nature with the animals. The book was published in 1927 when Barbara was just 12 years old, and it was praised up and down the nation. Her second book was published when she was just 14 and once again was critically acclaimed. However, despite her promising career, vivid imagination, and endless talent, Barbara was living under a cloud. In the lead up to her parents' separation in 1928, her father had begun to spend more and more time in New York, where he'd met and fallen for a woman 20 years his junior. The separation of her parents devastated Barbara, who was very close to her father. Reportedly, he was the biggest supporter of her creative endeavors, and he essentially abandoned her following the divorce. Not willing to quit just yet, however, Barbara encouraged her mother to start anew. Helen placed her other daughter Sabra into the care of a family member before she and Barbara headed off to start a new adventure, sailing from New York to Barbados and exploring the Caribbean islands. While traveling to Washington in 1929, Barbara met 25-year-old Edward Anderson. He became her closest companion, and Barbara ultimately fell in love with him. But the relationship Barbara wanted never took off, and she returned to the U.S. with her mother. From here, she enrolled in university, but quickly decided it wasn't for her and ran away to San Francisco. By all accounts, Barbara appears to have led a turbulent life as a teenager and young adult. By the age of 16, she was working as a secretary in New York City. She continued to write manuscripts but had fallen out of favor with publishers, meaning her newer work never saw the light of day. In July of 1934, she married Nickerson Rogers. The pair had met in the summer of 1931 while traveling across Europe. At last, the young woman seemed fulfilled and happy. But this euphoria did not last long. Just a few years later, in 1937, Barbara began to express her dissatisfaction with the marriage. In 1938, she began to suspect Rogers of having an affair and became increasingly distressed by the notion. On December 7, 1939, Barbara, now 25, left the home she shared with her husband in Massachusetts and was never seen or heard from again. According to Rogers, he and his wife argued and she left. She never came back and took with her $30, the modern-day equivalent of about $558, and a single notebook. All of her documents, manuscripts, and other personal possessions were left behind. However, Rogers did not report her missing until 2 weeks later, claiming that he was waiting for her to return. It is possible that the couple had argued because Rogers had asked Barbara for a divorce, but we don't know this for certain. 4 months later, Rogers asked the authorities to issue a missing person bulletin, but it was done under her married name, so the media did not pick up the case. Rogers also reportedly declined to publicize the case further, but this could have been due to Barbara's bad track record with the media. News outlets didn't actually pick up on her story until 1966. In 1941, Rogers reportedly attempted to divorce Barbara on the grounds of cruelty, but this was unsuccessful. However, he did eventually manage to get a divorce in 1944 and remarried shortly after. According to one of his daughters, Rogers hired a private investigator to help locate Barbara, but the investigator found no signs of the missing 25-year-old. In 1952, Barbara's mother Helen pushed for more to be done in her daughter's case. She suspected Rogers of being involved and even wrote him a letter that said, quote, "All of this silence on your part looks as if you had something to hide concerning Barbara's disappearance." She told him that she would do everything in her power to find out whether Barbara was dead or alive and where she was. Authorities never found a trace of Barbara after her disappearance. It has been theorized that she left to start a new life somewhere else. After all, she seemed to be an independent woman who loved adventure. It has also been speculated that she left to take her own life given her history of depression. One Reddit user pointedly noted that Barbara may have seen her husband's distant, cool behavior as an echo of her father's abandonment, which may have caused her great emotional distress. It's also been pointed out that her first love Edward passed away in 1937, and this may have added to the heartache. On November 25, 1948, a hunter found human remains in Mount Prospect Woods, which overlooked Squam Lake in New Hampshire. Barbara was fond of the area and had stayed in a nearby farmhouse with Rogers several times. The remains were skeletal, and some parts were missing, likely due to the weather and scavenging animals. But authorities were able to determine that they belonged to a woman in her mid-20s and that the skeleton had been there since at least 1939. For their parts, law enforcement determined that the remains were those of a 25-year-old pregnant woman named Elsie Whitmore who'd gone missing from Plymouth in 1936. However, there has been some speculation that the remains actually belonged to Barbara due to the discrepancies between the skeleton and Elsie. The oddities are as follows. 1. Glasses were recovered from the scene, but Elsie did not wear glasses. 2. A size 7 shoe was found along with the body, but Elsie wore a 5 or a 5.5. 3. No belongings from the scene could be identified by Elsie's family. It's also been noted that the Plymouth girl was in the later stages of pregnancy at the time of her vanishing, yet there was no indication in these remains that the body was of someone who was pregnant. And 4. A water flask and a medicine bottle containing traces of barbiturates were found at the scene. As a result, investigators believed that Jane Doe had taken her own life. And wouldn't you know, Barbara was known to have been prescribed barbiturates for her disordered sleeping pattern. No death certificate for Elsie was ever released, and her family never received the bones for burial. In fact, her family never really accepted the remains were hers. There is also no indication as to where the bones were buried or where they went. Their location to this day is unknown. Investigators closed their investigation roughly 1 week after the remains were found, satisfied with their conclusion that the body belonged to Elsie. There is considerable debate online about whether the bones could belong to the 25-year-old Barbara. However, without access to the remains, her descendants cannot perform DNA testing to verify or refute this theory. No trace of Barbara has ever surfaced since her abrupt disappearance, and no evidence has emerged to confirm or rule out foul play. To this day, her vanishing remains an unsolved and perplexing mystery. Moving on to the next case. Blanca Mabel Otero Alvarez. Blanca Mabel Otero Alvarez was born in 1952 in Cuchilaipe, El Chaco province, Argentina. When she was 21, her family moved to her parents' hometown of Chiliches in Spain. Although Blanca had been a school teacher in Argentina, she struggled to find work in Spain. Eventually, she secured a job with the National Rail Board. To be closer to her job, Blanca moved to Leon City, but she continued to visit her parents every week. Then, one day, she disappeared. She did not take anything with her. At first, her family did not report her missing because her father did not want them to. Finally, in 1997, they did report Blanca missing. By then, she would have been 45 years old. Within a few days of reporting her missing, the police found Blanca in the city of Gajan. She told the police, however, that she did not want to get in contact with her family. Her family was disappointed but determined to reunite with her. They made their way to Gillen, but learned that Blanca realized that they were on their way and gave up her apartment and moved on. In 2005, Blanca wrote a letter to her family that included a photograph of her. In the letter, she asked for forgiveness from her dad and said that she would make contact with her family more, but she never did. Little did her family know that Blanca changed her name to Ava and moved to La Fresneda estate. She was working, caring for children and pets, and cleaning houses. Her neighbors knew her for years without knowing she was a missing person. In August 2020, The local police received calls from residents in La Fresneda. They were concerned because they hadn't seen their neighbor, Ava, for a few days. The police had to force the windows open to get into her house. Inside, they found 68-year-old Ava sitting on the floor in her lounge. She was dehydrated and apparently absent mentally, not speaking, confused, and seemingly unaware of what was going on around her. She was taken to the Asturias Central University Hospital. Efforts were made to trace her next of kin, and it was eventually discovered that Eva was not listed on the local records. Finally, she was identified as the missing Blanca Otero Alvarez. Her family was contacted, and they were stunned to learn that Blanca had been found and was alive. Blanca's mother, now 90 years old, still needs to be informed that her daughter has been located. Moving on to the next case. Lam Yohe. Lam Yohe, better known as Elisa Lam to her peers at the University of British Columbia and the broader public, was a bright, thoughtful, and creative student. Her interests in fashion and talent for writing were overshadowed by the struggles of bipolar disorder and mental health challenges, which many believe played a role in her disappearance and tragic death. For almost 9 years, both amateur sleuths and professional investigators have searched tirelessly, scrutinizing every detail in hopes of uncovering the truth behind Elisa Lam's demise. Despite their efforts and the available evidence, these investigations have only raised more questions than answers, leaving the mystery unresolved and open to anyone willing to take on the challenge. As a hope to provide a more substantial reasoning built upon observable evidence and situational analysis, this is an examination of the bizarre circumstances surrounding Elisa Lam's confusing death. Elisa Lam was born on April 30, 1991 in Vancouver, British Columbia to two immigrants from Hong Kong, David and Yenna Lam. Her parents opened up a restaurant in Burnaby, Canada, and the family helped operate the popular dining spots called Paul's Restaurant for years. In 2010, Elisa started her first blog on the internet titled Ethy Fields. Throughout the next couple of years, she used the platform to showcase her love of fashion and clothing, often posting magazine articles and fashion-related photography. Elisa Lam often spoke candidly about her struggles with mental illness, expressing concern that her academic transcript, marked by dropped classes and irregular attendance, might reflect poorly on her. Despite these challenges, she wrote deeply and thoughtfully about psychology, emotions, and the human spirit. Her blog served as a canvas for her introspection, showcasing a bright mind and a reflective thinker. In her final post on her blog Ether Fields, Elisa announced a shift in her online presence to Tumblr, launching a page she titled Nouvelle Nouveau, meaning News New. On this platform, Elisa shared thousands of posts, including her own writings and curated works from other authors, alongside an array of evocative images. It was apparent on Tumblr that she held deep-rooted interests in classical books and films, experimental art, and design and fashion and culture. Sprinkled amongst these fascinations were bits of dark and brooding images, hinting at a more personal sadness and perhaps conflicted mind full of monsters, melancholy and misery. In fact, Elisa did have a history with a couple of psychological disorders. This narrative kept under wraps by her family for months after her disappearance and death. Specifically, she was diagnosed for bipolar disorder and depression. Bipolar disorder is a mental health condition characterized by episodes of depression as well as periods of unusually elevated mood, known as mania or hypomania. Elisa Lam managed her condition with medications like Dexedrine, Wellbutrin, and mood stabilizers. For much of her life, she coped with her struggles effectively, showing no significant signs of instability or risk to herself or others. Up until her ill-fated trip to Los Angeles in 2013, Elisa displayed resilience and functionality despite her challenges. It's essential to remember Elisa Lam as more than her diagnosis, a complex, thoughtful, and creative individual who lived with courage and humanity. She was a promising student at the University of British Columbia and obviously had a plethora of ideas about the world. She had a family, hobbies, and most importantly, a future. Unfortunately, it was cut short of its potential as the mystery of her fate began to unravel in December of 2012. Now let's explore the timeline of events leading to Elisa's death. On December 21, 2012, Elisa gives the first recorded mention of her desire to travel to the West Coast and visit a school in Santa Clara for potential transfer. On December 28, 2012, Elisa Lam mentioned on her Tumblr that she had misplaced her cell phone. As the new year arrived, she shared plans for her upcoming West Coast tour on January 5, 2013, marking the first time she suggested meeting people she'd connected with online. A few days later, on January 7th, Elisa booked her flight for the trip and posted a cryptic and unsettling message about the future on Tumblr. On January 9th, she revealed that paranoia had driven her to create a new Facebook account, her fifth, and she reposted a blurb she had written earlier that day. These entries provide a glimpse into her state of mind leading up to her tragic journey. Before the blurb is an introduction in which she claims, "This is the very start of my depression, and today I am feeling very low." Fast forward to January 18th when Elisa supposedly arrives in Vancouver on her tour. 4 days later, on January 22nd, she supposedly traveled to San Diego for the next leg in her journey after missing her initial flight while getting lost in the airport. On January 24th, Elisa posts on Tumblr that her trip so far has consisted mostly of activities and actions that she participates in back at home on a normal schedule. With this post, she hints at her later actions in Los Angeles when she says, "Every now and then I do something entirely impulsive and reckless." On January 27th, 2013, Elisa Lam posted on Tumblr about spending time with friends at a speakeasy. She mentioned losing another phone, though this one wasn't hers. It was a borrowed BlackBerry from a friend for her trip. The following day, January 28th, Elisa arrived in Los Angeles and checked into the Cecil Hotel, a budget-friendly accommodation near Skid Row known for its dark history. By January 30th, Elisa's roommates reported concerns about her odd behavior, prompting hotel staff to relocate her to a private room on the 5th floor to avoid disturbing other guests. On January 31st, the day she was scheduled to leave LA, Elisa was last seen by hotel staff and a bookstore clerk, Katie Orphan. Orphan described her as lively, outgoing, and friendly, despite being alone. This would be the final confirmed sighting of Elisa Lam. Orphan also said she was talking about what books she was getting and whether or not what she was getting would be too heavy for her to carry around as she traveled. Because Elisa was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel that day and travel to Santa Cruz for the last leg on her tour, both her parents were waiting for a phone call. In fact, Elisa had called her parents almost every night during her trip despite losing her temporary cell phone. After they heard nothing from their daughter, Mr. and Mrs. Lam flew to Los Angeles to file a missing persons reports and assist the Los Angeles Police Department in their search. Throughout the first week of February, both the Lam couple and the LAPD scoured the Cecil and the surrounding areas for any trace of Elisa. Tracking dogs brought in to aid in the search for Elisa Lam were unable to pick up her scent, leaving investigators without leads during the critical early days. Her hotel room revealed no signs of struggle, disturbance, or any suspicious items, deepening the mystery surrounding her sudden disappearance. On February 6, 2013, the LAPD issued an official statement online about Elisa's case, providing her description and urging the public to report any sightings or information. The following day, February 7th, a press conference was held, but no substantial tips emerged. On February 14th, the LAPD released a chilling piece of evidence, an elevator surveillance video from February 1st. The footage showed Elisa entering the elevator, pressing several buttons, and behaving erratically, peering out into the hallway, gesturing strangely, and seemingly hiding from someone unseen. The bizarre clip quickly went viral, capturing the attention of amateur sleuths and media worldwide. The clip was unsettling to say the least, but gave investigators one more glimpse into Lam's final sighting and brought the case to worldwide attention. The missing persons search would soon come to an end, however, when on February 19th, a Cecil Hotel worker responded to multiple guest complaints about funny-smelling water and low faucet pressure. The employee went up to the rooftop water system, peered into the open tank and discovered Elisa Lam's naked body floating face up. LAPD was immediately notified and the water tanks soon became a crime scene. A couple of days thereafter, on February 21st, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office issued a label of Elisa Lam's death as accidental due to the consequence of drowning with bipolar disorder, as a finding of other conditions contributing, but not related to the immediate cause of death. In June 2013, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office released the full autopsy and toxicology reports related to Elisa Lam's case. While the findings did not introduce any groundbreaking revelations, they confirmed that Elisa's body was discovered unclothed in the water tank, with her clothes, keys, and watch also retrieved from the tank, all covered in a sandy residue. Despite the official ruling that her death was accidental, the reports failed to quell public curiosity or skepticism. Over the years, the case has inspired an endless stream of theories, ranging from plausible scenarios to far-fetched conspiracies. These discussions, fueled by the enigmatic elevator footage and unanswered questions, have continued to overshadow the coroner's conclusions, ensuring Elisa Lam's story remains a haunting enigma. Many questioned the police investigation and even more saw possible holes in the final reports. Regardless, the timeline of Elisa Lam's death and its direct series of events blossomed into the most talked about case of the 21st century. Without a doubt, the most controversial and scrutinized piece of the Elisa Lam case is the 4-minute CCTV footage that the LAPD pulled from one of the Cecil Hotel surveillance tapes situated in the upper corner of a main elevator carriage in the northern corridor. The video is a bit grainy and segments of it are hard to clearly make out. But one thing is for certain, Elisa Lam is the subject of the footage and is clearly reacting to something. The enigmatic elevator footage of Elisa Lam leaves an unsettling impression that's difficult to shake. While the exact reasons behind her actions will likely never be fully understood, the clip takes on an even stranger dimension when viewed through the lens of her apparent unease. Her cautious glances out of the elevator suggest she might have felt she was being followed. At times, it seems as though she could be speaking, perhaps to herself, adding another layer of ambiguity. The seemingly arbitrary pressing of buttons upon her entry, the empty hallways, and her indistinct gestures and movements create a puzzling scene. The video resists any straightforward interpretation, leaving viewers with more questions than answers, even after multiple viewings. There have also been some controversy surrounding the tape's origins. Some people across the internet claim the footage skips 1 minute of the time code, but because of its low quality, it's not easy to point out. Others say the footage itself has been tampered with, purposefully pixelating Elisa's mouth at various points, but these reports have either been denied or flat-out ignored by professionals. One thing is for sure, the elevator footage from February 1, 2013 depicting the last known images of Elisa Lam have conjured both worthy concern and far-fetched conspiracies and remains the single most intriguing piece of evidence linked to the case. Since the day Elisa Lam went missing, the CCTV tapes were released and her body was discovered on the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel. Numerous theories have emerged worldwide, each attempting to unravel the perplexing mystery of Elisa Lam's death. Many of these speculations delve into the realm of conspiracy, veering away from grounded reasoning. Some suggest she was engaging in an elevator game to access alternate dimensions. Others propose she was influenced by supernatural entities, encountered paranormal phenomena, or even made contact with extraterrestrial beings. These ideas, while imaginative, lean heavily on hyperbole and coincidence rather than tangible evidence. They often serve to sensationalize Elisa's tragic end, transforming it into a narrative of science fiction or the occult, without offering any substantiated connection to the real-world facts of the case. For example, the location of the Cecil Hotel is in Skid Row of downtown Los Angeles. The area is infamous for its high crime rates and suspicious activity. Drug peddling and violent crime are common both outside and inside of the hotel, which has its own history of murder and suicide. In 1985, serial killer Richard Ramirez, dubbed as the Night Stalker, stayed in one of the 600 rooms of the Cecil in the midst of a killing spree that ended in the deaths of 13 women. Another homicide suspect, Jack Unterberger, stayed in the hotel in 1991. The Cecil Hotel, infamous for its dark history, was a frequent site for tragic events, including suicides in the 1950s and 1960s when individuals leaped from its rooftop. It was also the setting of a chilling unsolved case, the brutal 1964 murder of Pigeon Goldie Osgood, a beloved former telephone operator found mutilated in her room. Despite the macabre history of the hotel, none of its past tragedies directly connect to Elisa Lam's death. A more grounded theory suggests she may have been followed during her stay in Los Angeles, pursued through the Cecil's hallways, and ultimately murdered, with her body placed in the water tank by an unknown assailant. At first glance, this explanation appeared plausible. If you go back to multiple Tumblr posts that Elisa made throughout the end of 2012 and beginning of 2013, she was conscious about her outspoken nature and feared that one day her mouth would get her into trouble. At various points, she wrote about unsettling anxieties. One post read, "I'm going out tonight. I really hope no creeper comes near me." At least twice, Elisa was convinced trouble was lurking around the corner at the fault of her tongue, saying, quote, "I really need to be removed from society before my big mouth gets me in trouble and I get beaten up." Elisa Lam herself admitted in her writings, "My mouth is my downfall, and it will get me in trouble. I already do so many stupid things. I have trouble knowing where boundaries are, and it seems I always make the biggest mistakes at the worst possible moments." She reflected on how her impulsive actions often led to unintended consequences, particularly when attempting to cut corners or act without thinking. Additionally, she acknowledged a tendency to spark arguments with strangers, which raises the possibility that she might have encountered a confrontation in the wrong place at the wrong time during that winter in Los Angeles. This context adds another layer of complexity to the case, especially when paired with her peculiar behavior observed in the infamous elevator footage. After she enters for the first time and presses the floor buttons, she waits a few moments before slowly approaching the elevator's door frame. She then quickly sticks her head out in the hallway and glances from side to side in a hurried manner, then pulling back into the elevator. She pins herself against the wall and then into the corner, acting as if she was avoiding the vision of someone from outside. She goes back to the door frame once more and again, cautiously sticks her head into the open. From here, she makes a series of random movements before pressing more buttons. When Elisa returns outside for the final time, she appears to be communicating either verbally or with hand gestures, but no one is seen in the footage. This part of her movements could suggest that she was attempting to hide from someone, though her erratic footwork and dazed demeanor in the latter half of the video complicate the idea that she was actively fleeing from danger. These observations, combined with her Tumblr posts, raise the possibility that someone else could have been involved in her death. However, despite these suspicions, there are several counterarguments that suggest her death was not a homicide. For example, the absence of bruises or signs of bodily harm on Elisa's body seems to rule out the possibility of an assault. This discrepancy leaves the cause of her death open to interpretation and continues to fuel ongoing debate. All of her belongings were accounted for besides the long-lost cell phone, ruling out robbery or attempted robbery. The eyewitness testimonies by hotel employees and the bookstore clerk claimed she was completely alone and showed no signs of struggle or distress regarding another person. Cameras captured no other suspects around the time of Elisa's recording, and her lack of relationships in a new territory helped rule out a planned or just stated murder, as she had very little friends back at home, let alone Los Angeles. In the end, there was zero evidence confirming these theories about murder or foul play. This leads to a contradiction in the findings of the Los Angeles coroner's office. While the medical examiners prefaced their final conclusions with a disclaimer about the limited evidence, particularly due to the lack of blood samples for testing, they simultaneously state that the police investigation ruled out foul play. However, they also claimed that a thorough review of the case and consultations did not suggest an intention for self-harm. This creates a catch-22. The evidence doesn't conclusively point to either homicide or suicide, leaving the cause of Elisa Lam's death ambiguous and fueling ongoing debates and suspicions. The manner of death is classified as accident. So if there was no harmful intention either by Lam herself or a second suspect, then how exactly did Elisa accidentally climb up a massive cylinder, discover it was a water tank, lift up an incredibly heavy lid and jump into the dark water. And if the lid was already opened, why did she choose to climb in as a response? Murder and suicide are polar opposite explanations that have both been deemed inapplicable. Believers that Elisa was killed by somebody else linger over the fact that the rooftop access was protected by alarms on the doors and the fact that her accessing the water tanks required agility and strength. This sets a foundation for the theory that Elisa Lam's death was the result of a manic episode induced by her bipolar disorder. The toxicology reports confirm the presence of medications, specifically antidepressants, in her system, which suggests that her mental state on the day of her death was influenced by these substances. These factors, combined with her previous struggles with the disorder, could have led to erratic behavior, such as her actions in the elevator footage. The presence of the fire escapes and the easy accessibility to the rooftop, where the water tank was located, strengthens the theory that Elisa may have wandered up to the roof during a manic episode, unknowingly climbing into the water tank. Given her mental state, she may not have realized the danger or the impossibility of escaping from it once inside. The lid on the water tank being lighter and easier to open than originally assumed further supports this theory. In this context, Elisa's death could be viewed as a tragic accident, where her mental health struggles, combined with the environment of the Cecil Hotel, led to an unfortunate series of events that ultimately resulted in her drowning. One of these drugs was bupropion, known to sometimes cause mania and bipolar disorder. Another mood-stabilizing medicine had metabolites traced to her enzymes, but Elisa's antipsychotic medicine was not found in her system. So in review, Elisa had only taken one of her prescribed drugs the day she passed and had only taken the others recently, if not at all, in the days leading up to her death. The toxicology reports also confirms that Elisa had no alcohol in her system or other recreational drugs. This rules out the possibility that she had been under the influence of substances while on camera in the elevator or that something such as marijuana, pills or drunkenness inspired her to climb into the tank. Her liver wasn't tested for rohypnol, and the absence of urine suggests she excreted any potential drugs before reaching the tank. Considering her mental health history and the effects of her prescribed medications, it's important to understand mania. Episodes can involve psychotic symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. One mental health expert described mania as disorganization yet appearing singularly focused, which could explain her seemingly random yet deliberate actions in the elevator, as though she had a specific purpose. Symptoms of mania also include psychomotor agitation, which involves repetitive, purposeless, or unintentional movements and behaviors. Dr. Daniel Morell reviews in a medical journal that these actions can result in the wringing of the hands, pacing, and taking off clothes repeatedly. All three behaviors were exhibited by Elisa, both in the elevator footage and in or around the water tanks. The fact that Elisa Lam attempted to go to the roof at all could be a response to hallucinations or delusions. What these might have been are unknown, and it would be unfair to Elisa's memory to assume and fictionalize her mental illness. It's crucial to recognize that manic hallucinations can involve all the senses, not just sight, which might explain why Elisa removed her clothing. The combination of irregular medication use, being in a foreign place, and lack of communication with home could have triggered her manic episode. Guests she stayed with reported her odd behavior, which led to her being moved to a private room. The final piece of evidence supporting this theory comes from a confidential source, referred to as Resident A, who wishes to remain anonymous, but their testimony offers further insight into Elisa's state leading up to her disappearance. After hearing about our investigation to the case of Elisa Lam and having little to no prior knowledge of this scenario, Resident A told us that a few years ago, they had a family member in Mexico commit suicide as a result of manic depression or bipolar disorder. Resident A stated that this family member died from drowning after plunging into the depths of a similar industrial water tank. Resident A also stated that this was a common occurrence for the family member who, as a result of their bipolar disorder, seeked out bodies of water whenever suffering from bouts of mania. Resident A confirmed that this family member was about 35 years old when they passed away, but had been suffering from mental illness for over a decade and had an inclination to run away and find attraction to water throughout the years. While this case has no direct relation to Elisa Lam, it's peculiar that both instances involve a confirmed bipolar subject who, as a result of their condition, drowned because of an unconscious gravitation to water. While there is limited research on phenomena like Elisa Lam's case, it's clear that her selection of the Cecil Hotel's water tank may not have been a mystery, but rather a tragic result of her psychological illness. After considering all available evidence, scientific research, and social patterns, it seems the chief coroner's initial report holds true, that Elisa Lam died accidentally from drowning as a consequence of bipolar disorder. Though various theories were proposed, the lack of concrete evidence and their speculative nature led them to be dismissed. The case has captivated people worldwide because it's often difficult to accept simple, tragic explanations for unsettling events. Psychological disorders are heavily stigmatized even today, but also very misunderstood. People don't want to accept that Elisa Lam was suffering from hallucinations due to bipolar disorder because that's only in her mind, and they struggle accepting such indistinction. Instead, it's far easier to tell our own versions of what we want to have happened. Something more fantastical or intriguing than mental illness. For example, some people believe another party was involved because Lam's cell phone was missing and her Tumblr remained active for months following her death. The simple explanation for some of the confusion around Elisa Lam's case lies in the fact that her original phone was lost weeks before her trip. Additionally, Tumblr accounts often populate with posts similar to previous content for a while after they go dark, which may have added to the confusion. Many struggled to comprehend how Elisa could make it to the rooftop and into the water tanks undetected. However, this is clarified in the undisputed material facts in the motion for summary judgment documents, filed after the Cecil Hotel was sued. According to Box 10, the rooftop access door is equipped with an electronic alarm system that alerts hotel staff when the door is opened. Box 14 notes that the alarm for this door did not go off at any point in January or February 2013. This means that Elisa used one of the 3 fire escapes to reach the rooftop, which was proven possible by an international guest at the Cecil Hotel via a YouTube demonstration. In addition, the motion for summary judgment reports in Box 20 that someone could theoretically access the water tank by climbing to the top of an elevator utility room and jumping down on the water tank from above. This photo depicts the elevator utility room in question, which allows easy access from a red set of stairs and a joined ladder. The leap from that structure to the water tanks is also quite negligible, as seen put to scale with the size of a human portrayed here. In terms of the elevator video, our story-centric minds want to fill in the hallways on either side of the elevator with monsters, and perpetrators, and supernatural phenomena. In the end, what truly happened on the night of February 1, 2013, remains a mystery only Elisa Lam herself could fully understand. What we can trust is that the unpredictability of mental illness, particularly her struggle with bipolar disorder, likely played a significant role in her disappearance. Elisa, a young woman grappling with an identity crisis and growing anxiety about her life's purpose, had been open about feeling the onset of depression and acknowledging the impulsive and reckless tendencies that could indicate a manic episode. These were signs she herself recognized, suggesting her mental state likely contributed to her tragic fate. Elisa Lam was at an age when many individuals begin to experience breakthrough symptoms of conditions like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, which can be triggered by stress or changes in environment. The unfamiliarity of Skid Row, combined with insomnia and a lack of proper medication, likely contributed to her confusion and eventual manic episode. There is no single factor that led to her tragic death. It was a combination of her mental health struggles, circumstances, and the viral nature of the bizarre video footage that sparked unwarranted conspiracy theories. This examination of her case should serve as a step toward reducing the stigma around mental illness and fostering a more compassionate understanding of her challenges. Elisa Lam was indeed a remarkable individual, full of potential, with her own passions, interests, and dreams. Her story reminds us of the importance of supporting and caring for those who face mental health challenges. It's crucial to continue the conversation around mental illness, to offer help and understanding before situations spiral into something as tragic as Elisa's. By honoring her memory, we can foster a more compassionate society and work toward preventing similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.